Welcome to Basic Skills. Today we're going to be talking about the basics of raising meat rabbits in the winter. Really, it's quite a bit different than in summer, just because of the housing. You need nice closed-in cages for the does, especially when they're having kits, and you have to worry about cans freezing up and all that sort of thing. They're also a little bit more susceptible to disease in the winter because you're not moving them around on pasture. Start by talking a little bit about feed. Rabbits are designed to eat approximately 65% grass. So since you don't actually have actual green grass in the winter, you're going to make up for that by feeding hay. So you're going to give them, a good sized bundle of hay every day, pretty much as they'll eat, and then some feed. Right now I'm feeding a mixture of non-GMO rabbit pellets and then some oats mixed in there, and that just makes the rest of the percentage so that they get all the nutrients that they need. If you're feeding pellets and oats, you want to give them about half a cup per day probably. We just have these little feeders and just pour it in there, and you don't want to make them fat. If they get fat, they're prone to heart attacks and stuff. They'll start getting a dewlap underneath their chin, and that just means you're feeding them a little bit too much. You need to back off a little bit, but that dewlap won't go away after you stop feeding them so much. So you don't want to be starving them, but you don't want to be overfeeding them. So it's a little bit of a tricky thing to get it just right. What we do in the winter for water is we just have tuna cans, and we make a little wire loop in there and just stick the can in it, and then that way when it gets full of ice you can take it out and put a new one in or whatever. They'll last for a couple years before they rust out. So that seems to work really well for us. One of the things you have to worry about with rabbits, as with any other type of animal, is disease. Really, it's like that old saying, ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. All I do is add about a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar in every time I get a gallon of water for them, and so then they just get that little bit of a boost every time. It just helps them stay healthy. And then I add diatomaceous earth to their feed. It's sold as powder to keep feed from clumping, but it works really well to help them keep getting rid of parasites. So that's what I do. I just add a bunch in with their feed every time, and so they eat it along with their feed, and it'll help get rid of any parasites that they do have. The other thing is, if they are having problems, like a runny nose or something, I'll give them a little bit of extra vinegar, and then I'll give them a little bit of golden seal on an apple, just a little bit of golden seal, and put it on a little apple slice, and they'll eat it, and that really boosts their immune system, helps them get rid of whatever it is. Telling if your rabbit's getting sick sometimes is a little tough. If they're getting a little bit of a cold, you can tell because they'll get a bit of a runny nose, and that'll be easy to spot. But if they've got parasites, it's a little bit harder to spot. They'll just start getting a little bit skinny toward the rear, and then if it goes too far, they'll end up, their legs will start sticking out straight, and they won't be able to walk around on them anymore. They'll just kind of scoot around, and by that time that happens, there's a good chance that your rabbit's not going to make it. I've only ever had one that actually made it through that, but by that time they're skinny enough that they're not much good for eating anymore anyway, so you might as well try. And I just take it out. If it's with other rabbits, take it out and put it by itself, and give it a lot of diatomaceous earth and extra vinegar in its water, and just try and boost its immune system and get the parasites out as quick as possible. So when it comes to breeding in the winter, it can be really tough because rabbits like to breed a lot in the spring, and then during the summer, they getting closer to the fall, as you go, they kind of slow down and have a harder time breeding, and then in the winter they're going to have a really hard time, especially at the beginning, and then as you get towards spring again, they'll just want to breed like crazy. So it's really tough to get them to breed in the fall and winter, but if you just keep trying all your other different does all the time, you'll end up getting litters out. So it'll at least hopefully keep you having enough babies to do something with. For breeding, you always want to make sure you stick the doe in the buck's cage, because her cage is her territory, and if you stick the buck in her cage, she'll want to beat him up. But if you stick her in the buck's cage, then she'll be fine. When you go to breed them, the buck's just going to mount on the doe and ride around on her a little bit, and then if he curls up and falls off, she's bred, but not always. So you want to stick her back in there about a week later, and that'll just, if she doesn't breed that time, you can bet that she's bred. And then 30 days later, after that, give or take a day or two, she's going to have her baby. So what you want to do is you want to make sure you stick a nice nest box in there. We made our own with wire on the bottom so it's not too hot in the summer, but in the winter you're going to want to put something in there to keep them warm enough. So I just made a bunch of sheet metal liners that you just drop in there, and that'll keep a draft from going up and freezing your babies. So you want to put that in there full of hay a couple days earlier, and so she'll make a nest and take care of everything like that, pull hair out of her stomach and line it and everything, and then you'll be good. You really don't have to worry about that, except maybe putting a heat lamp on them if they get too cold. Every once in a while, does will not want to use their nest box, so they'll build a nest off in the corner away from the nest box, and that's not very good, because then the babies will hop out of the nest and they'll end up getting too cold. Even in the summer, they can easily get too cold. So what you want to do is just keep putting that nest she's building back in the nest box, put the nest box over where she was trying to build her nest, and then if she never does build in it and she finally has her babies not in the nest box, you're going to pull out the babies, you're going to stick them in something, keep them safe for a little while, you're going to take all the hair out, put it somewhere, and you're going to take it and you're going to build her a nest. Your nest is never going to be as good as hers, but you're going to want to build her a nest and put the babies in it, cover them up nice and thick with hair, and just put it back in there where she had them at. And sometimes she won't want to take them, but most of the time she'll find them and she'll be fine with that afterwards. After your doe has babies, you're going to want to take the nest box out and count them. You don't want to do that the first day, you're going to want to do that the second day, just so they have a chance to settle in a little bit and you're not bothering them too soon, unless you built the nest in the wrong place, and you're going to want to fix that right away, and you're going to end up counting them anyway while you're doing that. But as you can see, she just takes this nest and she built this one, and all her babies are just in a little ball right under there underneath all this hair. She's just got tons of hair in here, and her babies are just all under there in a little ball, squirming around, and they're all doing fine right now. But the thing is that you're almost always going to lose a couple of babies, because there are so many variables. They'll hop out of the nest in the middle of the cold, even if you got a heat lamp on them, it just won't heat the cage enough. Or they'll crawl in behind the hay and they'll starve in 12 hours or whatever. You know, you're going to end up losing, you know, on average probably one out of every litter. Sometimes you won't lose any, sometimes you might lose a couple. It all depends on the litter. You know, you can work on getting it better, but there's so many variables. A lot of times it's hard to keep them all alive. So you really want to just, you know, take the best care you can of them and keep them warm enough. Try and make sure they can't get out of the nest, so you build nice high sides, and just try and make sure that there's as few things that they can do to mess it up as possible. Once your babies are 5 weeks old, a lot of people wean them, and a lot of people also rebreed the doe at 4 weeks. That's just kind of the standard. What I like to do is I like to wean them at 6 weeks and rebreed the doe at 5 weeks. when the babies are 5 weeks old. That way your doe's you're only gonna have to wait about 3 weeks for her to have another litter. It's more efficient that way. But if you rebreed her at 4 weeks, I find that it's bad for the does, and I like to give the babies that extra week to grow, and that just gives them a little bit of an extra boost. So once you wean your babies, you're gonna have to wait another 7 weeks till they're 13 weeks old before you can butcher them. So that's again kind of the standard. They'll be slightly bigger after that, but they'll also be a little bit tougher to eat, and so that's kind of when their growth spurt ends, and they're the biggest for the least feed type of thing. So that's a standard. So you let your bunnies, you wean them at 6 weeks and then let them grow till they're 13 weeks old, and then you're ready to take them to the butcher or do them yourself, whatever you like to do. One of the things most people worry about in the winter is the cold. They've got a fur coat on. My rabbits have survived negative 35-degree temperature just fine. The only thing you need to worry about is when it's wet and cold. If they get soaking wet and then they're cold, you're gonna have problems. But as long as you keep them relatively dry and it's cold, they won't even care. They'll get a little bit of frost build up on their mouth and stuff, but they don't even mind that at all.